Hey guys, what is up? Kid here. So I'm doing a quick deck profile, maybe quick. I might be a little longer than that, but on a deck that I've been having a lot of fun playing. I ended up taking this to Niagara and doing super poorly, but I think the deck is very fun. I think this is like one of the few metas where the deck itself is like positioned that like it's not the worst in the world, but it's not necessarily the best. It's definitely like a tier 2 deck, I would say. You could take this to locals and stomp some people for a bit until they get used to it. But it's actually a Kongming, a water Kongming Tera mage. It's basically they call it Curse Touch Kongming, essentially, because the namesake of the deck basically is Nimue Curse Touch. We use this to kind of have board control very easily with this. And like any allies that are being played, we can easily at least one for one them and not have to worry about their life stat or anything like that. They just get destroyed because of Nimue's Curse Touch. But we'll talk about that in a bit, but I guess we'll just talk about the material deck first of all. So obviously Spirit of Water, we're doing the draw 7 because I do think influence is really important. Yes, you can get a lot of influence once you get to Tera, the level 3 Kongming, because of looping Tera Sight and things like that. But one of the issues the deck does have is that you're only real out to not Nullifying Lantern, to Censor is basically frostbind it, or not fracturize it, or counter it before, or not even counter it, but fracturize it, and then giving your opponent basically an extra influence to be able to use access to your grave, to be able to use the float. Because one of the bigger strengths of this deck is that it does generate a lot of float into the grave, so it's pretty easy to get your Frostborn Paladins online, essentially, and just like be able to cycle cards that way, because all the cards we're using to remove other allies off the board have floating memory, or it's a generic float, so you can abuse that. But once Censor hits the board, it becomes kind of awkward, so I prefer to have the 7 hand, so I can work with that to get to level 3 and not always have to play to destroy the Censor, because sometimes if they bring the Censor out when you're already like level 2, it doesn't really matter at that point, because you're just gonna dungeon guide into 3 anyway most of the time. And even if they do it when you're already level 1, going to level 2 and 3, it's still a little bit easier to get there without having the float and keeping a really good hand size up. That was a lot talking about just being about Spirit, but yeah. Obviously, we're doing the level 1, 2, and 3 Kongming. We're using all the ones for A and B. The level 2 Kongming is pretty insanely powerful just due to its inherited effect, which is whenever Shifting Current changes from north to south, you get to draw a card. And then being south also during your opponent's turn is really beneficial for us due to one of the cards we use a lot to like slow the game down and stop our opponent from actually ending the game, because there are a lot of attack cards right now that we can abuse. One of Kongming's, like one of the big reasons to be playing Kongming, essentially. Next, the level 3 Kongming itself. This is kind of like the goal is the deck doesn't really have to be level 3 to like really do very well, especially if you have an established boards with Frostborn Paladins on there, like you're swinging in for face and chipping them down that way. Our main win condition obviously is Bagua Vital Demise. That's the best way to like close out games and do really big burst damage, but that doesn't always have to happen as long as you are able to control the board and just get in with pokes of damage here and there. You could eventually like only need like 1 or 2 Baguas to resolve to like win games that way. But the big thing about this is that it's effective whenever you cast a spell. You get to move your Shifting Currents, which is really important in this deck because we're going to be moving it a lot. You basically feel like a DJ the entire time, but the deck feels really great. Once you get to level 3, you have a Tera Sight to start looping, so you're basically drawing 2 to 3 cards a turn, and at some point your influence is going to be so massive your opponent can't really play through everything that you're going to throw at them, and then you'll eventually take over the game because of that. It's very awkward because sometimes the deck does struggle to close games out when you can't find like Abaguas and stuff, so you can start looping them. If they're stuck at the bottom of your deck, it becomes a really, really slow grind fest, and some games will take 30 minutes or even more to actually finish, which is an issue this deck does have if you somehow don't find the Baguas in time to start closing the game out. We're essentially like we're doing our best Xander Luxem impression, except they have like map to search out some of their win condition, and we don't. We have to naturally draw into it. Of course, we get to draw a lot, but it's just very awkward to get there sometimes when you are missing the pieces. Backup Charger is really good for this deck. If you play Fracturize, you usually just play Backup Charger if you're looking for that type of effect to draw the memory, because it generates the token, which you can Fracturize and then essentially go up in influence and then have a float in the grave, which is very good. Fan of 7 Debts. This is kind of unique to Kongming. We get to draw a card, and then we get to move the Shifting Currents any way we want by sacking it. So a lot of times you're going to be pulling this out when you're going for the kill turn, because there's a lot of times where you'll start to turn off to do 2 Bagwas, and then from Preservation, and then you do 8, and then during your turn you could do any extra you want to do if you can move it around, and then at instep you push it back to west and then do it again. And then if you need an extra 1 or 2 more Bagwas to go through, you could sack Fan of 7 Debts, and then recast them again to try to close out the games. A lot of ways I've closed out games when I've given this opportunity, because you have such a high influence and you finally get 2 Bagwas in, is at Recollection. We cast 1 to 2 Bagwas. During main phase, we cast 2 Bagwas again, pushing it back to east. And then from there, we go to instep, push it back to west, cast the Bagwas again. And if you need, like I said, if you need that extra one, you can sack Fan of 7 Debts to push it back to west again to cast 1 or 2 extra if you really need to be able to close it out. Because sometimes with Serene Spirits, you end up having to do 30 plus damage to actually close the game out. And sometimes you literally are killing them from they're at 4 health because you weren't able to get enough damage in essentially over time. GCR, so there's a lot of lists running around right now. My list is fairly different in that sense. I actually value the GCR because there are some off turns due to playing Acquisition or Rejection essentially in this list, that if we want an extra influence, and because we're going to have some off turns, especially we get to take our time going to level 3. A GCR is just very good instead of QSG here. And I'm also not playing the I forget the Tamer card. It's a really cute trick that if people are not aware of, you can sack and then add the thing to a Shenju ally, and they'll end up killing themselves essentially. But I felt the extra influence and the extra dig is pretty important in the list. Like I said, a lot of times you lose games more often due to not being able to find the Bagwas in time more than anything, because there are certain points of the game where you're at your peak efficiency. You've slowed down your opponent so much, you've controlled the board, but you just haven't closed the game out yet, and it's literally just because you need to draw more cards to find the Bagwas. If there was a way to search them out as soon as you're level 3, these games would be so much better. But you're kind of stuck in this position of, can I find my win con or not? This is part of the reason why decks like Razorgale sometimes feel horrible, because you can't find your win condition. You only play 4 of the card, you have no way to search it essentially, and you're kind of in this limbo of where are my Bagwas, where's my Razorgale, stuff like that. So yeah, GCR feels good. And like I said, there's earlier turns using Rejection, having that off turn, being able to use GCR instead of going to the Backup Charger, because you don't have the extra cards in hand to do it during Recollection. It feels really, really good. We played next is just kind of all our defensive tools, so Nullifying Lantern, since we basically start looping Terrasite later in the game. You just fill up everything else in here with defensive tools. So we have Nullifying Lantern to shut off things like Genbu and things like that, and also Rending Flames from any warrior deck essentially. I know Lorraine runs it a lot occasionally, so it's a really good way to not have to worry about that stuff. And it's nice too that we get it also Fracturize it, and then now our opponent can't really interact with it unless they play Excalibur or something. Nullifying Mirror, this is one of the good parts about the deck, is because we have this space in here and we don't have to worry about a lot of other things. We can mainboard Nullifying Mirror. That way, against all the wind decks that are running around, you can shut off their Valiant Breezes and any other decks that want to abuse Imbue and stuff like that. This is a pretty good answer to those decks. Safeguard Amulet, this is kind of a flex spot here. Some decks, it's nice to have this, other times not. But yeah, you could kind of switch this into whatever defensive tool you want it to be, or you could even make this into another draw if you really like. But Safeguard Amulet's in here, just throw it out there, and now if you're playing into Fractals or something, they have to kind of respect it or give you a Fractal to destroy this before they can really go for their kill turn. So all you really need is for these defensive tools to buy you an extra turn essentially. Same thing with Terrafring into Lorraine. When you know you're you should have a lot of answers for their sweeps, but going into their sweep turn, if you want to make sure they can't really do much during their sweep turn, you can play Terrafring in anticipation for their sweep turn, crack it when it's like ideal for them to do the sweep, and then like suddenly it costs them six essentially to sweep your board, and then maybe that's enough to like Frostbind or Cerulean Decree away their sweep. Or sorry, you can't Cerulean Decree it, but you know, Frostbind it or Rejection or whatever, and then it puts them in really awkward scenarios. Otherwise, we play Ceasing Edict in this list, of course, and it's one of the big tools you can use to go wide against Lorraine and Merlin and not have to worry about sweep as much if you draw into it. Finally, Wand of Frost, another draw Regalia that's nice, that also is another defensive tool for attacks. I really like abusing Wand of Frost into anyone that's doing like Slice and Dice, or they're trying to just remove their Paladins and stuff like that, especially on turns against Crux. If they resolve a Pendragon, it's really annoying because it's very easy for them to remove our 4 health allies, and Wand of Frost makes it that much harder for them to do that too, because a lot of times it's just like if your Hydro Guards live a turn, you just take control of the game completely. So Wand of Frost feels pretty good in those scenarios. All right, finally on to the main deck. So these are some weird cards, but it makes sense because of Nimue, so we'll kind of go over the package right now. So we have a Ameliorating Mantra here. The card basically has no real text other than target two allies and up to 2 objects actually, and then Floating Memory. That's all you care about, because with Nimue's Cursed Touch, we can cast that targeting 2 different allies. Nimue's effect will trigger and will destroy both allies. And then this being a Floating Memory is essentially just like an extension for our hand, because we need value anywhere we can get. So being able to 2-for-1 something while also getting a float feels really, really strong. There are issues though where like your hand can get really bricky because we're also running Reprogram as a 4-up. So the reason we're running this card is because it's a skill and not a spell, so we can target Shinju allies and stuff like that, or anything, or deal with cats that way. This is one of the easiest answers to cats a lot of the time. Otherwise, you'll have to fracturize their inert sword if you want to like defang the cat essentially. So the package there is just 4 reprograms, 4 Nimues, and 4 Mantra. That's how you take control of the boards and everything. So the only issue with this package, it feels very, very good, because once you have the combination of cards, it feels really broken where, yeah, you're only swinging for like 1 here and there with like the couple allies that you have on board. But anytime your opponent plays an ally, it's very easy for you to remove, especially if you have multiple mantras and reprograms in hand. Now, the downside to playing this package is that you will open up horrible hands of, I drew 2 mantras and a reprogram but no Nimue, and my opponent is starting to go wide on the board. And then you get into this position where a key card to your whole package, Nimue, that like basically turns all of your other quote-unquote dead cards essentially on, is just tucked away in the deck. Maybe it's in the bottom half of your deck, and then because of that you lose games. But the games where you get both into your hand, you feel very, very powerful. Of course, Nimue is a class bonus. You got to remember that. The first time I tested this deck out, I didn't realize it was a class bonus because I had proxied cards, and I tried to remove an ally when I was a spirit, which was really funny. But yeah, that's generally the package. It takes up 12 slots in your deck, which is kind of annoying. The only upside to this at the end of the day is that you have like 8 generic float that you don't really mind discarding at any point, just casting for free. And because of Reprogram has up to, and so does Mantra has up to on 2 targets, you can basically play these without targeting anything. If you need to just get floated to the grave, which is nice, because it gets really awkward once the movie's on the board. You can't target your own things if you need to or something like that with certain action cards. Next, I play the full 4 of Dungeon Guide, because there's a lot of games, like I said, where I'm playing through Censor and it's really annoying and I need to find the Dungeon Guide. Yes, you do get to draw a lot of cards depending on the earlier games, but you don't really start popping off with your influence until level 3. So it's kind of important once you draw into a Terrasite to just level up to 3, because then you can start looping the Terrasite, which is really good because a lot of the defensive tools you don't always immediately need. You only have to really worry about 1 to 2 turns in advance. So there's a lot of turns where it's just like the correct answer is just grab Terrasite once you preserve it. And then yeah, a lot of this they cut 1 usually to make room for something else. By the end of my testing, I just want all 4 Dungeon Guides because I want to see this card essentially as soon as possible, because it makes it easier, like I said, to get to 3 once you draw into your Bagwas and Terrasites and Sages. All right, so Acquisiting Rejection here. This is a card where I think there's a lot of, how do I describe this? There's just a lot of back and forth on whether how good this card is or not. I think this card is really, really strong. Originally, from my MTG experience and stuff like that, obviously your opponent always picks the thing that's best for them. So if it's okay to get this negated, then that's fine. Otherwise, you can draw 2. So when it comes to this card, you can't really think of it as a true counter, because if they're going for lethal, they'll just let you draw the cards every time. So like maybe if you need to draw into a Ceasing Edict or something, this could hopefully get you there. Otherwise, this card, you got to more imagine it as a road bump along the way for your opponent, where they have to make the correct decision. Otherwise, you could take over the game. I'm going to say this right now. When it comes to this rejection card, the correct answer, like 90% of the time, is just get your thing negated. You'd never want your opponent to draw 2. Unless you know like this is really, really important for you to resolve, then you give them the draw 2, and hopefully it's not going to get out of control too quickly. And from playing this deck so much and forcing that onto my opponent a lot of the times, I've found that people make the incorrect decision actually a lot of the time. Obviously, when you start playing against better players, they will know, depending on what's going on in the game state, that they should just let their thing get negated, because giving your opponent draw 2 is pretty detrimental unless the thing that they're doing is very, very, or as equally as powerful, essentially. I've enjoyed this card a lot since I've turned my whole opinion around on it. I'm probably going to do a video, a shorter video about just this card and like how to play it properly, because I do think a lot of players don't use this card the way they should be doing it. They're kind of using it as a real counter spell, and in reality, you need to. This is more of a if you're going to draw 2, I'm going to draw 2. If you're going to go up in influence, I'm going to go up in influence too. It's essentially like our draw, essentially. We both get to draw cards if you're going to draw cards type of thing, or you whatever your advantage is. I've liked this card a lot since playing it a lot more in water. I ended up playing it because I tried it in Water Seal. I hated that deck. I think that deck is very garbage, honestly. But the one thing I took away from that was Rejection was a lot better than I thought or gave it credit for. Especially once you understand how to properly use it and weave it in certain turns. Next, Ceasing Edict here. This is one of the main reasons I think you should be playing Kongming in general, especially in this meta. If you decide to play Kongming, like I said though, this deck is kind of like a tier 2 deck. It's pretty strong, but it's not gonna, I don't really think it's gonna like win an Ascent anytime soon. But it feels very fun to play the deck. If you feel like being big brain, this deck is for you. So Ceasing Edict is essentially a 0 cost Song of Frost for Kongming as long as your Shifting Currents is facing south. Luckily for us, a lot of the time we want to go north, then back to south to draw a card, which means now our opponent has to go, well, my opponent might have a cost 0 Ceasing Edict in their hand, and a lot of times this will just like, if they try to all-in you on something like Raining Flames and stuff like that, you just shut them down with this and it's kind of over. It's a really, really powerful card. Once you start playing with it, you're gonna really, really like it. Like I said, this is one of their huge answers to people who try to do sweeps to the board, like Carter, for example. If we go into Seal and they go to level 3 and they slam Carter on us and they try to cleave our board 4, we just go, no thank you, and they've kind of not only lost an ally, they didn't get to clear the board, and then you can push back from there. That's obviously if you don't have Nimue to answer them, but yeah, I digress. But yeah, Ceasing Edict, really powerful card. I think one of the key reasons to be playing Kongming in general, especially water. Force Cerulean Decree. I'm a certified Cerulean Decree hater. The more I've played this deck, I understand why it's good. There's a lot of times when Nimue's on the board, you can 2 for 1. One thing that I always wanted to do, but I haven't been able to do it like ever since playing this deck. But the big high for this card is you imbue it, target an ally for -3 while also negating something else. So this card gets to 2 for 1 something. Otherwise, usually it's like you target an ally and you just draw into memory a lot of time. I've also ended up using this card a lot, depending if I'm drawing too many Cerulean Decrees, is as a cycle to find something that's more important in the later stages of the game, because if it's gotten to the point where we're still digging and we're sitting with like a 12 card influence or something, and our opponent's starting to build back up their resources after spending all that time like slowing them down, eventually the negate never comes up, and it's mostly just going to be a card is going to be cycle or -3 on something or pop something with Nimue, essentially. Card is still really good. I play it as a 4 of. Like, I've been so back and forth on Cerulean Decree. I hate this card, but it's like I guess it's a necessary evil. It's a modal card that just every effect on it's like good enough, essentially. Which is really weird because I love modal cards, and for some reason Cerulean Decree just does not work in my brain as like a good card. But yeah. Next, Corliss Ward. I think this is another reason and one of the strong points to Kongming, especially going higher level, because you get at level 3, this will become a prevent the next 4 damage because it's next 1+ level damage that would be dealt to target unit. And when Nimue's on the board, it does also act as a 1-cost removal for your opponent's allies. You need to keep that in mind as well. Obviously, it's a spell, so it doesn't work on things that have Spell Shroud. And when Nimue is on the board, you have to remember too that if you target something on and it gets destroyed by Nimue's effect, even though your Shifting Currents is facing west, you won't get the draw because the card will fizzle because it no longer has a target. So the only time when Nimue's on the board that you get to get the draw is if you target like your champion to give it Force Shield. I've liked this card a lot. There's a lot of times where your opponent just like will calculate lethal, and then you're like Corliss Ward, get 8 shield immediately, and like suddenly you're way out of lethal range, and they're like, crap, I didn't like play around double ward essentially. Other than that, outside of when Nimue's on the board, this card is insanely good at protecting your Hydro Guards and stuff like that, and other allies on the board, because every cycle you get to draw cards off of a Hydro Guard is just a higher chance that 1, you're drawing into your win condition, and 2, you're just going to out influence and outplay your, not outplay, but like you get to beat your opponent on the resource game so bad because they're spending resources to try to remove the Hydro Guard, and you're just constantly protecting it while not losing a resource as well, because Corliss Ward does draw a card into your memory if your Shifting Currents is facing west. That way you don't really go down on influence ever, but they've lost either influence or time or a turn essentially from being able to remove the Hydro Guard, and while also protecting you, Hydro Guard is going to draw you more cards. Really, really powerful card. Corliss Ward is one of my favorite cards to play in Kongming. It's like another reason I like playing the water versions of Kongming. Fracturize is Fracturized. You got to play it. It's one of the best water cards. One day they'll reprint this card so it doesn't cost like $30 each. I played 2 Frostbind in here. This is kind of your flex spot. I just wanted some more interaction, especially earlier in the game, where I'm going down to like 3 cards essentially. If my opponent gets greedy and like tries to do something and goes mostly hands down, you can Frostbind stuff away. Into the Razor Gale matchups, I drew both Frostbinds against one of my opponents at Niagara, and then Frostbind and had them pay 2, and then Frostbinded it again just to make sure they don't get the first Razor Gale on the board, and that bought me so many turns before they could even get another one on the board that like the game was basically over at that point. But yeah. Frostbind is just a generically good negate. I think as this game develops more and the meta develops more too, influence is getting kind of out of control for a lot of people, especially since Crux is such a big component of like all the tier 1 decks right now. Their hand size and influence, all that stuff gets pretty wild once they get to Crux, and you can't stop them from drawing too many cards. And then suddenly you're both playing with like a 10+ card hand, and Frostbind doesn't do anything. It's mostly for the earlier game. This, like I said too, this is like the flex spot, so you can cut these and play whatever you want in this slot if you don't like the Frostbind. At the time I felt it was good. One recommendation I would say after playing in these events is Dismissal. I would have main board Dismissal instead of Frostbind, honestly, and then opened up 2 slots on my sideboard, because Dismissal is really good into a lot of the Crux matchups and then the other generic ally based matchups essentially. Frostborn Paladin, it's one of the best one of the best allies to be playing in water. Like, it's a card that it's a 3/4 ally that also draws you a card for using up a float. And this deck plays, I think it's like this variant of the deck plays 18 or so float. So Frostborn Paladins are pretty easy to get online. And if you end up playing against like Genbu or something, you're going to have a lot of float to work with your Frostborn Paladins. Next, Hydro Guard Retainer. This is another huge reason to be in water for Kongming. So this is a 1/4 taunt, and then whenever your Shifting Current changes from north to west, you draw a card from this. Any game you resolve 2 Hydro Guard Retainers and draw off of them both more than once, you've won the game. Almost every game I've played where I've like turn 1 Hydro Guard Retainer, then turn 2 level up to Kongming, play a second Hydro Guard Retainer, then draw 2, and then protected the Hydro Guard Retainers and drew another 2 off of them. The game just feels over. It's so absurd. Like, once the Hydro Guard Retainer like engine starts going and you're able to protect it is obnoxious. Your influence gets out of control very, very quickly, and now your opponent can't really play through everything that you're drawing as well. One of the big things too about Hydro Guard Retainer and like most of these allies in this deck, 4 health is a lot of health in this game for allies to have. So it usually takes like 2 swings to like remove it or some kind of spell. And then, like I said, you have a lot of ways to protect it. One of the big things being Corliss Ward to protect your retainers. And one thing to keep in mind too, because we have like once you get multiple Hydro Guard retainers onto the board, you can always do the thing where they swing into one and you can just retaliate, and now they're forced to swing into the other one, so you can protect the other one if they can't like remove it in one swing and they need like 2 swings to go into it. Those board states are really annoying for your opponent to really navigate very well. Next, Thronekeeper Bullfrog. This is like a necessary evil in a sense. Like I really like this card. I've liked it in every deck I've played it in. But I also hate this card because it's not a very great top deck. A 0/4 float taunt doesn't really impact the board that much. But anytime you play into what's it called? Into any aggro deck that's especially board based, having a 0/4 on the board for them to deal with, it's like I said, 4 health is a lot. It's still really annoying for them to get through. The only downside is it has no attack, which means it can't retaliate to protect itself if you have multiple taunts on the board, making it harder for your opponent to go through. It's a good card. It's a bad card. It's just a mediocre card that's really good, and it has generic float, which is great because like if you turn 1, open this up, play it, and then next turn you can like backup charger, and then usually by that, after your second turn, they usually have to swing into it to remove it at some point, and so you get the float to level up into Kongming. Otherwise, you have other ways to do it, like any of the other generic float you play. But this is a really good stopgap measure where like it buys you a turn or so against these aggro decks essentially. Next, I played 2 of Water Barrier. This is a really, really strong card, especially once I got more used to playing it. It's kind of awkward sometimes, especially in the earlier states of the game when you don't have as much influence to really play this out, because it does cost 3, but it is a float for yourself. And a lot of times you're using this to block fireballs or Rending Flames, things like that. So it just stops them from getting so much extra damage, and it's a generic float. You usually sideboard the extra one in when you play against Merlin and stuff like that, where there's more big damage burn spells coming through than like increments of 1. This card does get awkward into like Kongming, or not Kongming, Dao-Chan, Fire Dao-Chan sometimes, because like a lot of their damage is like ping for 1, and this blocks everything except for 1, so it almost does nothing. So Bagua Vital Demise, this is kind of your win condition for the deck, and it's the part of the deck that's like such a struggle bus. You just have to draw these early enough to start getting it online so you can start doing your best Luxem impression. So Bagua Vital Demise costs 2, and then as long as your Shifting Currents faces west, you can activate these cards from your material deck, and then the effect itself is deal 4 damage to target unit, and if Shifting Currents is facing east, put this card into this owner's material deck Preserved. So Preserved is a mechanic where whenever the card is resolved, it'll go into your material deck, and then instead of materializing something, you can always add this back to your hand. What's nice about this card is that you can activate it from your material deck as long as you're facing west on your Shifting Currents, which means like your opponent can't regal you to remove your win condition, because it's always going to be in your deck, or your material deck. There are some cards, I think it's like Orbis, not Sealing, but there's some cards that will remove cards out of your Preserve deck, but no one runs it because that's literally like, this is like the only deck that really uses Preserve, honestly. So you start looping these. Like I said earlier, your biggest win condition usually is like to get 2 of these going, and then like in one turn you can do 16 damage, and then with like an extra one, or with the Fan of 7 Deaths, you can push that even further and just do like 24 damage in one turn if you need to, which is really nice. I've done that a couple times to some Luxem players where they've healed down down to like last, like they only have like a couple damage on them, and then I just kind of pop off with like 3 Bagwas because I drew into 3 and just in the game in one turn, which is nice. But like I said, any deck that their entire win condition is tied to like one set of cards in your deck, some games just go on forever because you can't find the Bagwas to close the game out, or your opponent has enough protection to stop this card. So some things about Bagua: if your opponent gets like Spell Shroud or something, this card will fizzle and won't get preserved. But if they block the damage, even if you do 0 damage, it'll still get preserved. You just need the card to resolve. As long as it has a target, it'll be able to resolve. But yeah, Next, Septernal Sage. This card is insanely powerful. Anyone who says otherwise is either never played with this card or they haven't played Tera, essentially. This card on its own is a threat that has to be answered over and over again, which is nice because whenever this ally dies, it gets preserved. Once it hits the graveyard, it goes to your material deck, so you can add it back to your hand again, replay it, and swing in. What's great about this card is in the later stages of the game, you do have to kind of use your life points a little bit more as a resource in this, so you'll be taking some damage here and there, and as the game's going on, once you get to level 3 and you're sitting behind some stuff, Septernal Sage pushes damage to your opponent or helps clear things out, but you also recover 3, so your life total gets stabilized, and eventually you can actually heal down. There's been a couple games where I've healed like all the way down from like 18 damage back down to essentially 0. It's really annoying for your opponent to deal with this card. There's no real good way to deal with it, because as long as it hits the graveyard, it goes back into your material deck preserved. You have to like banish it off the board or something, and there's not a lot of cards that really do that right now. So it's a threat on its own. This is kind of like your alternate win con in a sense, but it also buys you time to find the Bogwas to really close the game out. I really like this card. I think 2 is like the perfect amount for main deck, and then you play the second or the third or fourth one in the side into matches you think this card will be really, really powerful into. But yeah, Septernal Sage, really strong card. Test it out if you haven't. I really like it. Finally, Tera. It's your fake GCR essentially. So every time you cast this card, you draw a card and it gets preserved. And so you can just loop this card back into your hand over and over again. What's really nice about this is that with your level 3 Kongming, you got a 0-cost spell card that not only keeps your influence up, but it lets you trigger Kongming's level 3 effect to be able to move the shifting currents to an adjacent direction. And this is kind of how you kind of get into a cycle of drawing 3 cards a turn. So the game plan before I can find enough Bogwas to win the game, usually I'm trying to search for 2, and I'll like play a Bog. Like if I have 1, I'll preserve it immediately, and then just like every recollection phase, I'll just go ahead and cast it, use Terrasite, and then shift it east, and then put it back into the deck, and then in the material deck preserved, and then Terrasite preserved. Having that free cost spell helps you manage your currents a lot, and the games where you're still digging for it too, it's really important to have this card in those scenarios because you can essentially draw 3 cards a turn. So for example, you go from north to south and you draw a card, you use Terrasite to go east, preserve it, then you go back to your turn, add Terrasite back to your hand, use Terrasite to push it north, and then you go south again. And then as long as you have another spell you're going to be using in between at some point, like any of the negate spells, essentially, any defensive spells, you can still move the shifting currents into a direction, and then you only need the Terrasite to push it once again back to north, so you can go south again to draw a card. So you effectively draw a card off of Terrasite for adding it to your hand, you draw a card for the turn, and then you draw the card at the end of turn going from north to south. And so this is how you get your influence into unmanageable proportions. I think the highest influence I've had in a hand before like I was able to close game out was like 15 or 16 cards, because I just couldn't find the Bogwas. They were just so deep down in my deck. Then my opponent was like blocking everything else that I was just like, I need to start being able to loop Bogwas. But as soon as you find the Bogwas with such a fat influence, you're able to just loop so many all in one turn. If they don't have protection against the damage, you just win the game right from there, which is nice. The sideboard I used at the event, I would totally change the sideboard, but this is what I used at Niagara. Blanche, one of the weaknesses to the deck is that you don't have a lot of good ways to block any of the burn damage, essentially. Blanche in games 2 and 3 against those decks is very, very powerful. So you go to 2 fairly early, I would say, like maybe turn 4 or 5 usually, and then Blanche is online. You surprise factor people a lot. One of the games, someone tried to stratagem me. I let them banish all the stuff with all the things on the stack. In response, I summoned Blanche out after they targeted me for everything, and then it just basically blocked all the damage from the stratagem, and they lost all the flow, which is really great. Really powerful card. It's only really busted into the matchups where it really matters, and yeah. Regal Inquisition. This is in the list because at locals we have a Luxem Xander player, and the matchup's really rough if you don't get the Bogwas on early enough. You need to be able to pick apart some of their wing conditions and stuff like that. So Regal was really important in those matchups. But outside of that, I almost never board this in, oddly enough. Like against Merlin, it's all right because you don't want them to get the I forget the name of the horse or whatever they get out of the regalia ally. If that comes on the board and you don't have Nimue on the board to answer it immediately, it's really, if the game gets really rough from there. Regal Inquisition is one of the cards we can use to pull out the spell card that brings it out from their hand before it's online for them to essentially cast it for just a couple influence. We'll play the 4th Ceasing Edict in the side. Some matchups are weird where like Ceasing Edict is just a dead card. That's why I didn't want to go the full 4. We just play the 4th on the side. The matchups that matter, like Lorraine, Merlin, and stuff like that, you just bring in the 4th one. So Touch is in here too because the matchups. I really like this card. It's not, honestly, it's not that amazing. Like you should just find some, if you're going to build this deck, find something else in this slot to play. Because the reason it's in here is that the matchups where Nimue literally does nothing, I cut all 4 Nimue, put in the touches immediately. Because at least that now is a card I can 1-for-1 my opponent, take something out of their hand into the Luxon matchup, for example, too. You know, once they go ahead and use their map to get part of their win condition into their memory, now you know there's Luxon in their memory. You can touch them, and if they don't use one of their negates, one of their incaps, then you can remove part of their win condition from their memory, and then that's just one less card you have to worry about. Touch is very interesting in those matchups too, because the reason I like it over Regal Inquisition a lot of times is because we're not always looking to get to 3 as soon as possible, which means we don't have access to the EX cards as often, or before our opponent goes to 3 and starts using their stuff. So at least Touch in those matchups lets you disrupt their hand, you know, before they go to 3. I've used Touch a lot in the Crux matchups, not necessarily this version of the deck, but into like Lorraine and stuff in another version I was playing. I would use the touches, I'd hold them until they go to level 2, and if they don't turbo to 3 immediately after, I'll use Touch on them to see if I can find their Pendragons and remove them from their hand, because you lose games where they start resolving the Pendragons over and over again, because not because of the Pendragon as an ally on the board, it's the influence starts, all the incremental advantages you've worked so hard for get destroyed because they're drawing 2 cards extra basically every time they play a Pendragon. It's really rough. Frozen Dismissal, like I said, this is a card I probably would move to the main board because it's so good in the Lorraine and Merlin matchups. Being able to just Frozen Dismissal away a Pendragon, because a lot of times if they turbo to 3 and their influence is kind of low and they try to get greedy by playing Pendragon, you get a Frozen Dismissal it and you don't have to worry about it ever again. Sometimes just being able to Frozen Dismissal away 1 Pendragon buys you enough time to really take control of the game completely and in the game if you have the Bagwas, because their influence is just going to be too low for them to really interact with you at that point. We play the 3rd copy of Waterberry here. Just kind of comes in for the Merlin matchups and stuff. Also, I guess, what's the one? Goja, the dragon ally thing, where they can blast us with Arcane Blast. Then finally, play the 3rd Sage on the side for when I feel like getting the heal 3/3 ally is more important than finding my immediate win condition, because I need earlier stabilization. Also, adding an extra Tera card means that I don't mind banishing it too often, because our level 3, when we go into level 3, and if we have any Tera banished, we get to heal a little bit. Doesn't come up too often. You usually heal like 1 to 2 at most. But it is something that comes up and like to consider too. Like you're like, okay, I'm fine with banishing away at 1 Terracide and a Sage or something just to get an extra heal here or there going into 3 into these matchups to help you stabilize into the aggro matchups essentially. But yeah, that's essentially the entire deck itself. Like I said, this is a tier 2 deck for sure. I don't think it can really win an Ascent right now, mostly just because Crux exists. This deck feels, it's really weird because if you don't fight any Crux, a lot of the time this deck feels obnoxiously powerful into Tristan, for example. They can't redirect anything essentially because Nimue just answers those immediately. A lot of times in the Tristan matchup, I will just like hopefully hold the Nimue or protect the Nimue, and then when they level up and they get 2 shadows, you just pop the shadows with Mantra with using Nimue. One of the things too to keep in mind too is like when you're playing this deck, you have to consider what if you're going to top deck Nimue, if that's an answer you're looking for, because sometimes the board states get out of control if you don't find it, and you just got to figure out which line is the most optimal line to survive. because I think this is the one of those decks that's like, as the game goes on, you should have more control over the match as the game progresses, unless you're playing into Crux. Crux is just, they have an infinite influence once they hit level 3. I just if someone figures out that matchup for me, let me know. But the Crux matchup is really rough for this deck. But yeah, outside of that, this deck is a lot of fun. If you're looking for something to bring the locals and feel like you have a big brain because you're constantly shifting the currents all around, this is a deck you should. There is another deck, I think main deck posted, I think it's Fox Attack was the name. They posted that list that recently top 16 of regional. It's very similar to this. They don't play rejections, obviously. I think that's kind of the divide between what I was doing and what like most of the Kongming, like, I don't want to call them one tricks or whatever, but the people who love playing Kongming since her release, they don't really like rejection because they don't think the card draw is that important. Like I said, it's more, the card for me is more about slowing down your opponent, and if they choose not to slow down, you also get accelerated as well, which makes it easier for you to also level up because you went up a card, so you can banish a card if you don't have float and still be even with your opponent essentially. But yeah, so that's a list. Like I said, a lot of fun. You guys should definitely test it out. If you guys want more of my thoughts on the deck, or from, or like, I don't know, how to play it a little bit better, or like examples, I guess let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video for this, but I am going to make a second video, I don't know when it's going to come out, probably in a day or two, about rejection itself, because I think a lot of people don't understand this card as well, and I also think that people are playing this card incorrectly, and that's why they think this card is as bad as it is, or as bad as they think it is. And I think people aren't playing it against it very well either, like giving your opponent draw 2 when they shouldn't, like 90% of the time. But yeah, it is a really interesting card, and it, like I said, the card turned out to be a lot better than I thought it was going to be, which has been interesting. But yeah, with that being said, guys, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Later, everyone.